"Your sister's wedding will be perfect," my mom said with a proud smile, looking around the living room filled with wedding decorations. "But tell me something, when is your turn?" For a moment, the room went silent. I looked straight into her eyes and calmly replied, "It already happened." The smile on her face froze. My sister stopped scrolling through her phone. My father slowly lifted his head from the newspaper. The relatives sitting around us looked confused, like they had just heard something impossible. "What do you mean it already happened?" my mom asked, her voice suddenly shaky. I leaned back in my chair and let out a slow breath, because the truth was my wedding had already happened, and none of them were invited. But to understand why, you have to go back 3 years. Back to the day my family made the biggest decision of my life, without even asking me. 3 years ago, our house looked very different. My parents were obsessed with one thing, my younger sister, Hira. In their eyes, she was perfect. Beautiful, charming, the pride of the family, and me. I was just the responsible one. The quiet son who always sacrificed his own plans for the family. Whenever there was a problem, they called me. Whenever money was needed, they looked at me. Whenever my sister wanted something expensive, I was the one expected to make it happen. And for years I did. I worked 2 jobs while studying in university. I barely slept, barely went out with friends, barely lived my own life. But every month, most of my salary went straight to my parents. "It's for the family," they always said. "Your sister's future depends on us." At first, I believed them, until the night that changed everything. It was raining heavily that evening when I came home from work. The lights in the living room were on, and my parents were sitting with 2 strangers, a wealthy-looking couple dressed in expensive clothes. My mom smiled the moment she saw me. "Perfect timing," she said. "Sit down." Something about her tone felt strange. I sat on the sofa, confused. The rich man across from me studied me from head to toe like he was evaluating a product. Then my father cleared his throat. "These are Mr. and Mrs. Rahman," he said. "They own one of the biggest construction companies in the city." I nodded politely. But then my mother said something that made my stomach drop. "They have a daughter?" I frowned slightly, and I asked. My mother clasped her hands together happily. "They are looking for a husband for her?" For a moment, I thought she was joking. But nobody laughed. Mr. Rahman leaned forward. "Our daughter has certain health issues," he said slowly. "But she is a very kind girl. She deserves a good husband who will take care of her." My chest tightened. Then my father said the sentence that completely changed my life. "They are willing to support our family financially if you agree to marry her." The rain outside hit the windows harder. I looked at my parents, waiting for one of them to say this was some kind of ridiculous misunderstanding. But they were both smiling, hopeful, expecting me to agree. "Wet," I said quietly. "You already discussed this without me." My mother waved her hand dismissively. "We knew you would say yes. You always do what's best for the family." My hands slowly curled into fists. "And what about what's best for me?" I asked. The room went silent. My father's voice turned cold. "Don't be selfish." Selfish. That word echoed in my head. For years I had sacrificed everything for them, and now they were calling me selfish because I didn't want to marry a stranger for money. My sister suddenly spoke up from the corner of the room. "You should do it," she said casually. "Think about it, we could finally move into a bigger house." Her words felt like a knife sliding into my chest. That night, my parents didn't ask for my opinion. They pressured me. They guilted me. They reminded me of every sacrifice they had supposedly made for me growing up. And by the end of the night, they had already given the Rahman family their answer. Yes, the wedding would happen in 2 months. Without realizing it, that was the moment my family unknowingly pushed me toward the decision that would change everything. Because while they believed they had trapped me into a future I never chose, they had no idea I had already started planning something of my own. Something that would make the entire family question everything they thought they knew about me. And the most shocking part. The first step of that plan began with the girl they were forcing me to marry. The first time I met her, I expected anger. Or at least sadness. After all, she was the girl my parents were practically selling me to. But when she walked into the quiet cafe where we agreed to meet, she looked nothing like the fragile, helpless person her parents had described. She walked slowly, yes, but her eyes were sharp, observant. The kind of eyes that miss nothing. She sat down across from me and studied my face for a moment. Then she said something that completely caught me off guard. "You don't want this marriage either, do you?" I blinked. For a second, I didn't know what to say. Then I let out a quiet breath and replied honestly, "No." She nodded slowly, like she had already expected that answer. "My parents told me you agreed happily," she said with a faint, almost sarcastic smile. "My parents told me the same about you," I replied. For a moment, we just looked at each other. 2 strangers sitting across a table, both realizing they were trapped in the exact same situation. "My name is Ayesha," she said finally. "I know," I said. "I'm Zayan." She leaned back in her chair slightly. "Let me guess," she said. "Your parents said this marriage will help your family financially." I nodded. "And your parents?" I asked. She gave a small, bitter laugh. "They think marriage will make me look normal." I didn't understand at first. But then she spoke again. "You heard about my health issues, right?" I nodded carefully. She tilted her head slightly. "I have a heart condition," she said calmly. "Nothing contagious, nothing dangerous to anyone else, but apparently it makes me undesirable." Her words carried years of quiet frustration. "For my parents," she continued, "marrying me off to someone loyal and responsible is their way of solving the problem." I stayed quiet, because suddenly this whole situation felt even more unfair than before. Two people, both being used, both being forced into a decision neither of us made. Ayesha stirred her coffee slowly. "So tell me something," she said. "Are you gonna run away?" The question hung in the air between us. I thought about it. Running away would be easy. Disappearing from this mess, starting a new life somewhere else. But then my mind replayed something my father said that night. "Don't be selfish." The irony made my jaw tighten. Selfish. After everything I had done for them. After years of sacrifice. After giving them my time, my money, my energy, and now they wanted to sell my future too. Something inside me hardened at that moment. "I'm not running away," I said quietly. Ayesha raised an eyebrow. Oh, I leaned forward slightly. "I'm gonna let the wedding happen." Her eyes widened just a little. "That doesn't sound like a smart plan," she said. "Not yet," I replied. Then I lowered my voice. "But what if the wedding is only the beginning?" Now she looked interested. "Explain?" I looked around the cafe to make sure nobody was listening. Then I said the words that would slowly begin shaping everything that happened next. "My family thinks they're making the smartest deal of their lives. They believe this marriage will bring them money, status, and security." I paused. "But what if it does the opposite?" Ayesha stared at me for a long moment. Then something unexpected happened. She smiled. Not a polite smile, not a nervous smile. It was the smile of someone who had just realized a game was about to begin. "I think," she said slowly, "I might like where this is going." That night we talked for nearly 3 hours. Not about love, not about romance, but about truth, about control, about families who believed they had the right to decide someone else's life. By the time we walked out of that cafe, we weren't just two strangers anymore. We were partners in something far more dangerous. A plan, and the first stage of that plan was simple. The wedding would go exactly the way our families wanted. Perfect decorations, hundreds of guests, smiling faces. A celebration that made everyone believe this was the happiest moment of our lives. But behind the smiles, behind the photographs, behind the music and laughter, something else would be quietly taking shape. Because while my parents thought they were gaining control over my future, they had no idea they were slowly losing control over everything else. The wedding day arrived faster than anyone expected. The house was full of relatives, noise, excitement. My mother was glowing with pride. My sister kept telling everyone how lucky our family was. Even my father looked satisfied, walking around like a man who had just secured the best deal of his life. And the Ramen family? They were calm, almost too calm. Because Ayesha and I had agreed on one very important rule. Nobody would suspect anything. Not yet. The ceremony went smoothly. Vows were exchanged. Photos were taken. People congratulated us. Everyone believed the story they wanted to believe. But later that night, after the guests had left, after the house finally became quiet, my father knocked on the door of the guest room where I was sitting. He stepped inside with a satisfied look on his face. "You did the right thing," he said. "For the family." I looked at him carefully. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the obedient son sitting in front of him. Instead, I felt something very different. Control. Because the truth was, while my father believed the deal had just been completed, the real agreement had been signed hours earlier, not between him and the Ramen family, but between me and Ayesha, and what he didn't know yet was that the first move of our plan had already begun earlier that evening. Right there, during the wedding itself. And if anyone in that house had looked closely at the documents that were quietly signed that night, they would have realized something terrifying. Because the marriage they celebrated so proudly had just legally connected our families in a way none of them fully understood. And the moment the truth came out, everything they thought they gained from this wedding would start disappearing, one piece at a time. The morning after the wedding was strangely quiet. Usually, after big family events, our house would still be buzzing with relatives, laughter, and leftover conversations from the night before. But that morning felt different. Almost calm, too calm. My mother walked into the dining room carrying a tray of tea, humming happily. My sister was scrolling through the wedding photos on her phone, admiring herself in every picture. "Look at this one," she said excitedly. "My dress looks amazing." My father sat at the table reading the newspaper, looking more relaxed than I had seen him in years. Why wouldn't he be? In his mind, he had just secured the future of our entire family. A rich connection, financial stability, a successful son-in-law relationship with one of the most powerful business families in the city. Everything had worked out exactly the way he wanted. Or at least that's what he believed. A few minutes later, Ayesha walked into the room. She moved slowly, but confidently, wearing a simple white dress. Her expression was calm, almost unreadable. My mother immediately stood up with a wide smile. "Ayesha, dear," she said warmly. Come, sit. You're part of the family now. Aisha smiled politely and took a seat next to me. For a moment, nobody noticed the quick glance we exchanged, a silent reminder. The plan had already started. My father folded his newspaper and leaned forward. So, he said proudly, now that the wedding is done, we should start discussing the next step. I raised an eyebrow. What next step? He looked surprised that I even had to ask. Your future, of course, he said. Mr. Rahman and I talked about it yesterday. My jaw tightened slightly. Of course he had, without asking me again. You will join their company. My father continued. They want you to start learning the business. Construction is a huge industry. My sister clapped her hands excitedly. That's amazing, she said. Imagine my brother working in such a big company. My mother nodded proudly. See, everything worked out perfectly. Aisha quietly sipped her tea. Then she asked a simple question. What makes you think he will work there? The room went silent. My father frowned. What do you mean? Aisha placed the cup down carefully. Because as far as I know, she said calmly. That decision was never discussed with him. My father's expression hardened slightly. He's my son, he replied. Of course it's my decision. For a brief moment, Aisha looked at him with an expression that was almost amused. Then she looked at me. I understood immediately. It was time. I leaned back in my chair. I'm not joining the company, I said. The reaction was instant. My mother looked shocked. My sister stared at me like I had just said something insane. My father's face darkened. What did you say? I said. I repeated calmly, I'm not joining their company. His voice became sharp. You don't get to decide that. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel intimidated by him. Instead, I simply reached into my bag and placed a thin folder on the table. My father looked at it suspiciously. What is this? Documents, I replied. He opened the folder slowly. At first, his expression was confused. Then it changed. The color slowly drained from his face. My mother leaned closer. What is it? He didn't answer. His eyes moved rapidly across the pages. Then he looked up at me with disbelief. You transferred the house. I nodded calmly. Wes. My mother gasped. What do you mean transferred the house? I folded my hands together. The house is no longer under your name. My sister's voice rose immediately. That's impossible. My father slammed the papers on the table. When did you do this? Last night, I said quietly. Silence crashed into the room. My father's hands were shaking slightly as he picked up the documents again. But this says. His voice trailed off. My mother grabbed the papers and read them herself. Her face turned pale. It's under Aisha's name. Aisha remained completely calm. Yes, she said softly. My sister jumped to her feet. This is insane, she shouted. Why would you give our house to her? I looked at her steadily. Our house? I asked. For a moment, she didn't know how to respond. Then my father spoke again, his voice filled with anger. You had no right to do this! I tilted my head slightly. No, right? I repeated. Then I calmly said the one thing he had completely forgotten. You transferred the house to my name 2 years ago. The room froze. I continued quietly. You said it would make loan approvals easier. My father's eyes widened. He remembered. Of course he remembered. Back then, he trusted me completely. Because I was the obedient son, the responsible one, the one who never questioned anything. And because of that, he never imagined I would one day use that trust against him. But giving it to her, my mother whispered. That's because, Aisha said calmly, we're married now. My sister looked furious. This is some kind of trick. Aisha looked at her calmly. No, she said, it's simply legal. My father stood up suddenly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. You think this is funny? He snapped at me. No, I replied quietly. I think it's fair. His eyes burned with anger. Fair? For years, I continued. I worked for this family. I gave you my money, my time, my life. My voice stayed calm, but every word carried weight. And when you needed something bigger, you decided to sell my future. Nobody spoke, because deep down, they knew it was true. My father pointed at the documents. You planned this. I met his gaze. Yes. My mother looked like she was about to cry. But why would you hurt your own family like this? I stared at her for a long moment. Then I said quietly, you're not hurt yet. The room went completely silent, because what they didn't know was that this was only the first step. The house transfer was just the beginning. The real part of the plan, the one that would shake their entire world, had already started moving behind the scenes. And within the next few weeks, they were about to discover something far worse than losing a house. They were about to lose the one thing they valued more than anything else, their reputation. My father stared at me like he was seeing a stranger, not the quiet son who used to obey every order, not the boy who worked day and night just to make the family comfortable, but someone else, someone he no longer understood. You've lost your mind, he said slowly. Maybe, I replied calmly, but at least now I'm finally thinking for myself. My sister crossed her arms angrily. You think transferring the house makes you powerful, she said. You'll regret this. Aisha finally spoke again, her voice calm but firm. This isn't about power, she said. It's about balance. My father laughed bitterly. Balance you call stealing from your own family balance. I leaned forward slightly. No, I said quietly. Stealing is what you tried to do to my life? That sentence hit the room like thunder. My mother sat down slowly, looking overwhelmed. For the first time, none of them had an answer. But my father wasn't done. He slammed his hand on the table. "You think this is over?" he said. "I will talk to Mr. Rahman. This marriage was supposed to help both families. He won't accept this nonsense." A small smile appeared on Ayesha's face. "That might be difficult," she said. My father frowned. "Why?" She calmly reached into her bag and placed another document on the table. My father grabbed it impatiently, but the moment he read the first page, his entire expression collapsed. "What is this?" His voice sounded weaker now. I answered for her. "It's the partnership agreement." My sister looked confused. "What partnership?" Ayesha folded her hands on the table. "Last night," she said calmly, "my father officially transferred 40% of the Raman Construction shares." My father's eyes widened. "To whom?" he asked slowly. Ayesha looked at me. Then she said the words that completely shattered the illusion he had been living in. "To Zayn." My mother gasped. My sister looked like she had stopped breathing, and my father just stood there, frozen. 40%, he whispered. I nodded. In exchange for marrying their daughter, they wanted someone they could trust to help manage the company. He stared at me like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You never told us." I shrugged slightly. "You never asked." My sister suddenly shouted, "This is unfair! You're destroying our family!" I looked at her calmly. "No," I said. "Our family destroyed itself the moment you all decided my life was something you could trade." Silence filled the room again, this time heavier than before, because now they were beginning to understand something terrifying. The boy they thought they controlled was now the most powerful person in the room. My father slowly sat back down. His voice was no longer angry, it was tired. "So, what happens now?" That was the question they had all been afraid to ask. For a moment, I didn't answer. I looked around the house. The walls, the furniture, the place where I had grown up, where I had sacrificed years of my life trying to please people who never truly valued me. Then I finally spoke. "You can stay here," I said. Everyone looked up immediately. My mother's eyes filled with hope. "Really?" I nodded. "Yes." My sister looked confused. "Then what was the point of all this?" I turned toward her. "The point," I said quietly, "was for you to understand something." She frowned. "What?" "That power changes when respect disappears." My father looked down at the table. He understood. Maybe for the first time in his life, he truly understood. "You're teaching us a lesson," he said slowly. I shook my head. "No." Then I stood up. "I'm showing you consequences." The room stayed silent. Finally, my mother spoke again, her voice soft. "So what do you want from us?" I looked at her carefully. Then I said the simplest answer of all. "Nothing." That confused them even more. "Nothing," my sister repeated. I nodded. "For the first time in my life, I don't owe this family anything." Ayesha stood beside me, and together we walked toward the door. But before leaving, I turned around one last time. My father was still sitting there, staring at the documents, the man who once believed he controlled everything, now realizing he had lost it all, not because someone betrayed him, but because he pushed too far. "You know something funny?" I said quietly. They all looked at me. "The wedding you forced me into." I glanced at Ayesha. "Turned out to be the best decision of my life." She smiled slightly. Because unlike the deal our parents had tried to make, our partnership had been built on something else. Respect, understanding, and a shared decision to take control of our own futures. As we stepped outside the house, the morning sunlight felt different, lighter, free. Ayesha looked at me. "Do you regret any of it?" she asked. I thought about the past 3 years. The pressure, the anger, the betrayal. Then I looked back at the house one last time. "No," I said. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying someone. I paused. It's simply living a life they can no longer control. Ayesha nodded. Then together, we walked away. And behind us, for the first time ever, my family finally understood the cost of treating someone like they had no choice. Because the quiet son they once controlled had just rewritten the entire story of his life.